Right, hello, welcome to Sisyphus Complex Solution. This is episode 189, and as you can see, it's called Dad's Army. You'll get pretty quickly as to why it's called Dad's Army, I suspect, and if not, there's a very direct reference that will make it plainly obvious. But just to say that after the process part of the episode, there's going to be more for me to say about the issues with the DVLA, which I think can start to prove a little bit of informative, and some other additional areas that I want to talk about there. But suffice to say, they've now committed both fraud and theft, and I'm basically in that going to call them out as well, and that for being anti-white racists, because why not? Obviously, you might know that yes, the hair is getting long again. I decided why not. Doesn't matter, does it? So anyway, in terms of this week's episode, right, we start by looking at the Reserve Forces and Cadets Associations, where they do produce annual reports, but they don't produce financials, which is really helpful. Now, from the information that I've got on the screen here, what I can do is deduct that it is made up of 13 associations around the country. A little bit more on that later on. And the people that's come along from those organisations, it should be, I'm going to assume it on this basis, that it would be one person able to claim expenses that are covered up to, and I'm taking it at the high end of 10,000 per year. So on that basis, I'm going to establish that we're looking at a cost for this association of 130,000 per year, and I have checked with the full length of from the benchmark period of 2019 to 2020 through to their last report, which is 2024. They are late on the more recent one. But each time it's the same information, so I can add that taxpayer burden on the full audit basis. In terms of what they're about, it should be fairly obvious as per usual, but essentially this is a route for the regional associations for cadets and military reserves to provide advice through to what's called the Defence Council. Now I'll show you what that's about shortly, because the Defence Council again is not one of these things that is a listed organisation under the MOD, but I don't think it really needs to be, and that bit you'll see why. So in terms of the reservists, this is what we used to call the Territorial Army, or basically part-time soldiers. And then obviously cadets, and that is the more youthful side of things. And as you can see, this was first established in 1908, but now it covers each of the services, so it does also then include the Navy and the Air Force. But to exactly what kind of an extent that's possible on a part-time basis, that's questionable, to be honest. There will be some numbers to suggest that there is something there, and I do find that one a little bit odd, but nevertheless. I suppose the core of this is based on, in terms of this associations group, it's effectively based on the relationship side of things with employers, rather than just providing advice through to this Defence Council. And the reason why they have these relationships with employers, because obviously there does need to be some kind of discussion needed for employers to allow their employees to be available and to have a sort of a reasonable relationship on that basis, because there are occasions where at least from the experience that I've had in the past with this sort of stuff, the territorials always had, I think it was at least once a year, and that where they had to go away for a couple of weeks on training. I wouldn't be surprised if that's no longer the case, and I'll give you some examples as to why I think that's probably true. Again, a little bit later on. But essentially, it's so that these conversations can take place with employers, so that there are no barriers put in their way. And they also tend to get involved in the I think that there's certain areas of funding within, I forget what it's called now, the Armed Covenant. So not only are they getting money from charities and that, or giving money out to charities and that, but I think there's a certain amount of the employers putting some money into that as well. But that to one side. In terms of an idea, I'm not really going to criticise it too much, but as with all things, the devil is in the detail. Now, in terms of this Defence Council that they're supposedly advising, well, this isn't one of those sort of typical sort of Blair initiative type of situations that we need to be concerned about, because this came into being via the Defence Transfer of Functions Act of 1964. Now, to me, this looks like the kind of group meeting, effectively, that you'd pretty much expect to take place anyway. And I'm not entirely sure why this needed to be something that was requiring legislation. So let's say, I mean, if you said like, right, okay, we're going to have a bit of a war room gathering prior to going into like the Prime Minister's office or something like that, you'd expect these people to be having these conversations anyway. So I don't really quite get the point of that. But you know, I'm not going to be overly picky about that. I mean, it'd be up to somebody a little bit more informed probably to be able to say as to whether this actually is a good use of legislation. Obviously, we can notice that the Reservists Association, they're not stated inside this Defence Council. So the precise mechanism of exactly how they're doing this advice it's not exactly clear. But again, I don't think I really need to be overly pedantic and critical about that kind of thing. Presumably they're coming into, ideally that you'd think they'd be getting in touch with whoever it is that's actually the head of the Army, the Navy and the Air Force and so forth. But anyway, this is the basic idea behind this particular association anyway. So when it comes to the reserves themselves, this is a chart that I think is quite important from their 2024 report, and it shows the numbers of reserves as of 2012, which was after the military strategy review report that was produced under the fake Tory and the Libtard coalition, and then how things have gone since they thought that locking the country down was a good idea. And just to add insult to self-inflicted injury, it's worth understanding that also during this particular period, and that between 2012 to this 2024 reporting period, the population had increased by over 4 million. So in normal circumstances, you'd expect as the population increases, so do the number of people that are prepared to either be in the military or in the reserves. Quite the reverse. So the high point was 2021, according to them, when the wider population were finally starting to wake up to the fact that they've just been screwed for the best part of 2 years. And so what's happened as a result of that, plainly, is a drop of 13%. Now, keep in mind that this also comes during a period when the government has kept up the rhetoric of Russia, 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 and we want war. So if you combine the coronavirus lies with this, we want to go out and fight for the Nazis, that are, and then at the same time as now being run by commies, I doubt that there's, I doubt that these numbers are going to be getting any better in the years subsequent to this 2024 report. Oh, the bloody thing's gone out. Anyway, I ain't gonna bother. So there's been a whole range of different issues that are making people turn their back on the government and certainly not want to fight for them. And and like I say, when that coronavirus stuff and how they just completely wanted to destroy the bloody nation and everything since, and then to try to blame it all on Brexit. Yeah, people are turning their backs. So apparently what they're doing to try to reverse the obvious, what they're looking to do now in terms of their latest strategy is to hold this delusion that bribing the employers now with like participation medals is somehow going to make the youngsters want to be ready to die for them, which I think I can be pretty accurate in assuming is not really going to work. One of the main companies that they're promoting on their website at the moment in terms of this is Mars. And you're going to have to excuse me if that doesn't really seem like a prime candidate for producing well-trained burly men. So they've got a serious issue in terms of the reservists. And all this sort of stuff, and that goes towards a great many farces that have been taking place over the last week, and I particularly like with Greenland. You know, we're going to defend Greenland. We've sent one soldier over. It's all a nonsense. So anyway, in terms of the regions, this is the 13 regions where they have for each particular association, and I just want to show a couple of things from just a select few of these. And so we begin with this particular promotion picture from the Southeast Reserves, and also within that particular web page they have another picture of some girl that looks like she's taking a selfie. But quite honestly, I mean, what in the name of God is that supposed to be? If you're talking about promoting the reserves, people that would be ready to go out and fight for the nation, and yeah, it looks like they're just a bunch of hobbyists. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, I know that the guys from the military have always had an issue with the what they call the part-timers, the plastic soldiers. But I mean, this is just. I mean, at least do have something where everybody is holding the oar in the right direction, some synchronicity to it. This is promotional. Absolutely ridiculous. So then we go to the West Midlands, and when you go to their website, the very first message that you're greeted with is whether somebody wants to hire out their place for a disco or whatever the hell it is that they're expecting somebody to do within there. All things that are completely separate to the actual purpose of what the place is intended for. Not good, is it, really? Or let's have a look at London, because this one is just quite typical, really. Right, London obviously wants to attract black kids by suggesting that they'll get a social media presence, because nothing says we are leftist hypocrites and we look down on you whilst pretending we don't, and then imagining that they're going to pander to them on the basis of low IQ persuasion. Nothing says that more than the way that these people promote these things. And they honestly think that that would have some kind of an impact. I mean, we can certainly have a conversation about IQ based on demographics, something that has been a pertinent conversation again this week. But I dare say they won't really like doing that, despite the plain and obvious admission that you create promotional strategies based on it. I suppose the difference would be is that I don't look at black people as being as thick as these people clearly think they are. What we're looking at in London is the kind of mentality that produces the kind of people that if you remember the Pret woman, if we don't have the immigrants, who will serve me in Pret? This is the kind of mindset that you have that would produce something like that. It's no wonder those black kids aren't exactly going into the reserves in any numbers. I think they know when they're being taken the piss out of, because it really is the kind of the leftist hypocrite mindset that even a recently arrived immigrant would actually understand. These people virtue signal, but in reality they just consider themselves the new slave masters, or at least, like I said, they think they are. And that's a part of the problem, really, across the board. All of the falsehoods of these ideologues and these delusional people. Nobody's going to fight for you, because everybody can see exactly what kind of mindset that these people have got. You're just not going to get it. It's not going to happen. So then what's the other situation that's going on with reservists at the moment? You know, another great grand plan that they've got. Well, you've probably heard this already, and obviously the reason for the title of the episode. Everybody else had the exact same thought that I did when I started to do the notes for the episode. So their great idea is, because they're finding that getting new recruits is so difficult because of their condescending methods, they're not going to be holding out any hopes of all of the military age men that they're importing from the third world. No, they're going to start looking to recall former soldiers up to the age of 65. Now, previously that had been up to the age of 55, but only in the event of an absolute emergency. So literally, if war was declared, they could recall people up to the age of 55. They're going to start bringing the reservists up to the age of 65. So, you know, they're not going to force all of your Pret servers that are supposed to be some great multicultural benefit once they step on the magic soil. Oh no, it's all about get Grandad back in. These people get more ridiculous by the day. So this is the devil in the detail as to what an absolute joke this nation has become. Now, I know that a lot of people are a bit outraged by recent comments by Trump and that, saying that in the recent skirmishes, because that's what they were realistically, out in the likes of Afghanistan, Iraq and so forth, that Trump had effectively insulted the British forces by saying that they'd sort of stayed in the background, despite the British forces having suffered the second greatest loss, obviously behind the Americans. And so everybody's sort of getting overly upset about him saying that the Brits stood in the background. Well, I suppose it depends on what your definition of background is, because just because you've had people that have been fatally wounded in a battle situation, it doesn't actually necessarily mean that you've been in the front lines. And I put up something on X today, which can give a bit of an indication as to how somebody like a Trump might be a little bit confused about these things. Because I put up an example of this Mike Tapp, the local Labour Dover MP, and his comments in an interview that he did with Peter McCormack, something like around about maybe 5-6 months ago, something like that. And because it always stuck in my mind that he really does try to push himself as being, I served in the military, I served my country, when all he did was stay in the barracks the entire time and eat Pizza Hut and Subway, by his own admission during this particular interview. So I made that plain on X to say this is the kind of nonsense that is being put out there. So of course you might end up with people out in the US going, do you people actually do anything? It is ignorant to not then take a proper look at things, but just on face value. They have to also, these people do need to understand how they're presenting themselves to the wider international community, because they want to rewrite history as we're going along as it is, and basically saying anyone. I mean, like with our guys that were out in Ireland, that are constantly being persecuted even to this day. So any of the guys that we've had in our forces, everything that they've done that has been good throughout the entirety of history is all being claimed to have been white supremacy and criminality of some description. And then everything that is supposedly good is based off of some retard sitting in a barracks eating Pizza Hut. So it's not beyond the realms of reasonableness to turn around and say, right, well, if that's the way you want to present yourselves, then that's the way we're going to treat you. It doesn't bode well, obviously, in that, and I'm sure the people and the families and that of those people that have actually been in the forces and have actually been in that situation, not like that Labour idiot, but real people, I'm sure that they can become quite offended. But at the same time, I'm sure they can also go, look at what my country is doing to this place. Well, look at what these politicians are doing to this country. Look at how much persecution they're doing against us when we've actually been doing the fighting. You tell me which one's the worse. So I think this, when people want to talk about things like ignorance, they might want to pay a little bit more attention to the ones that are actually doing the real damage. So anyway, just a small number to add to the finances in this week, so no real big deal there. In terms of the policies, then I've had to add another column to the review and reform, and so I've included this association within that, because it obviously it does need to be looked at. Now, in terms of doing a review and reform and what I would actually do with these reserves, this again is something that it requires a wider perspective that I want to be able to look at once I've completed the MOD, rather than make stipulation about it now. And I also want to be a little bit cautious in terms of what I do believe should be taking place, because I'm not really keen on presenting ideas that people that I hate and that hate this country might want to try to manipulate. So I'm a little bit cautious on this at the moment. But suffice to say, my base idea would not be founded on bringing pensioners into the bloody service. But it would be something that, just as a hint, and that would be based on a much more a longer life-term cycle. But like I say, I'll discuss that in a certain amount of detail once I've got to the end of the MOD. Right, so now we get into the rant section and the areas of the DVLA. So last week I mentioned how the DVLA had put a clamp on my car, and on screen I've got two of the continued complaints that I've had to make in the interim, and where I can say that the sum that I'm demanding based off of the days of interference have now equated to a demand for £9,000. And then, as you can see at the bottom, they literally stole my car today. Now, whether it be the local MP or the DVLA, aside from stealing the car, they've literally done nothing to resolve the matter at all. And as I've mentioned in the top response, I did have what I suspect is a con artist pretending to be the DVLA try to make contact over X. But considering that particular account was based in Europe and does things like putting likes on my posts outside of working hours, I suspect it's actually not them. I have also then subsequently had some contact with the policeman that I mentioned last week. But this time he's being about as much use as he was the first time I encountered the fella. And this is where two additional problems have now started to come in. One is the actual crime that's been committed, and the other one is taking wider matters into consideration. I think there's a legitimate case to be made for anti-white racism. So, to explain that, you might remember, if you've been with me for a while, that 2 years ago my car was subject to a hit and run. Now, at the time, the police were completely useless for over 3 months. Then, when somebody actually did bother to finally do some actual police work, which is the guy that I'm talking about at the moment, it turned out that the owner of the car, so not the driver, but the owner of the vehicle at the time, was a black man. Now, according to the witness, the driver was a foreign man, but not a black man. But it turned out that the owner was a black man. So, when I say the owner was a black man, if anybody wants to get their knickers in a twist and that about me saying a black man, this is how it was described to me by the policeman at the time. So, you know, if you want to get your knickers in a twist, then, you know, have a go at the police for it. Now, obviously you would have expected them to pursue that particular person and provide me with the name, at least for insurance purposes, if not for the fact that they should have been criminally prosecuted as well. But what they actually did was give up on the black man because he was no longer residing in the place where they thought he was. And then they wanted me to make a claim on the insurance on the basis of naming a white man who had owned the vehicle before him. Now, naturally I refuse to do that because that is making a false statement. And I'm not going to be making false statements against a white man to save some black man who's just gone and caused severe damage to my vehicle. So, the police were basically then giving me this name to try to justify running away from trying to find the black criminal, which they obviously then didn't do at all. So this same policeman contacted me today and told me that the company that had taken my car was called NSL. And so this now creates a bit more of a palaver of how they don't really seem to do anything properly. Because the problem here is that the guy that took the car was wearing a DVLA jacket, so like a high-vis type of jacket and that, but it had DVLA written on it. And when I asked him directly if he worked specifically with the DVLA, he said yes. So that's false representation and hence fraud, which is another crime. So what we've got now is a situation is when the police previously wanted me to commit a crime and report a white man in an insurance claim who was not involved in anything. And this time they want to enable the DVLA to use a proxy to defraud me, a white man, when both the DVLA and the police have quite clearly shown from historical events that they will run away if I'm a black man. Nobody would have touched a thing if I'd have been black or an immigrant. Now, to me, that's anti-white racism. You might say this is being a bit pedantic and a bit tenuous and all of the rest of it, but considering the kinds of accusations that get thrown around in this country, where everybody has to be called a racist all the time, then I think I've got some justification for throwing it back at them. Because if they won't try to prosecute immigrant or black criminals, but they want to target people like me, a white man, then that can only be them having anti-white racist intentions. So they think that they can steal my car. And what I didn't mention last week, because last week I said that I was in dispute with them, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because what they'd actually done initially, and the reason why I used the opportunity to enter into this dispute over the amounts that they were trying to claim from me, was they'd actually prevented me from registering the vehicle correctly. Because all of their methods via their idiotic website don't actually work. The reference numbers that they provide to you don't work, and then they say, well, if that doesn't work, then you can use the reference numbers that you have on your, was it the VC5? That didn't work either. So there's no way for me to be able to inform them of the status of the vehicle, which, like I said, had to go through MOT and so forth. And because I'd had that issue, that became a part of the letter that I'd written to them. And so I thought, well, it's a good timing then for me to be able to enter into that dispute for these ridiculous tax demands. And because that letter was written on December the 14th, again, we're dealing with a situation where they think that they can come and steal my vehicle in less time than any of them would ever bother their asses to investigate an actual crime that then turns out to have been committed by a black man. So they conveniently avoid any investigation in actual crime. But when I've got an issue with the DVLA that is ongoing, oh no, we're not going to bother with hanging about or listening to what's going on, or we won't bother reading your letter. We're just going to come and steal your car. And just for clarity in that, 2 years later, they still haven't arrested the black guy. So when I'm faced with a situation when in this country we have police that want me to commit fraud, and now the DVLA want to steal from me on the basis of fraudulent representation, I think it's fair game for me to step up things a bit, because these are quite patently incompetent racists, and I'm not going to tolerate it. In a wider regard, then, I also want to talk a little bit about how these government departments are now removing the ability to be able to directly contact them, presumably because it then enables them to do the type of thing that they're doing now, such as lying, stealing, enabling fraud, and just being anti-white racists. This is obviously a sign of weakness on the part of the government, and where they think that they can make demands of us, send coercive letters, cause inconveniences, like putting clamps on cars and stealing cars, but they never actually engage in anything. And this is up to and including the local MP, who's proving to be an utter waste of space, which I'm not entirely surprised about, because she is a climatard after all. But they're removing this ability for anybody to contact them increasingly as they're making demands that they cannot justify. Another example would be the TV licence. I've had all the letters, I've had all the warnings, I've had all the claims that somebody was going to come to visit the house. None of it's happened. I mean, why? Because they have no justification at all for this level of harassment. And they know that they can be told to fuck off, as increasingly people up and down the country are doing. And if we combine this with all these people with their I don't consent, but then back that up with nothing, I think what we need to be looking at realistically is how the state is so weak, and the people that are hiding behind their little offices and avoiding any ability for people to be able to communicate with them. It shows the pitiful level that these people operate under, that they believe themselves to be incredibly powerful and important, but underneath it they know that they can't justify themselves at all. And so the more that they can remove themselves from direct contact, the more they will do that, because their complete delusion would be popped somewhat in the face of reality. And this is a good reason why they are looking towards digitising everything, because they want that layer, an additional layer, to remove them from having to deal with the public and coming into contact with the consequences of their actions. But we don't have to actually interact on this basis. Well, we certainly shouldn't be operating on the basis of a situation where it's a case of them making demands for us to pay them through various types of taxation and other inconveniences. But they want that all done up front, and then for us to ask questions afterwards, which they will then completely ignore. So I think that the table that needs to be turned here is that we need to be asking first, justify yourselves properly before we'll give you a single penny. Because it's not about the country going bankrupt if they don't have any money. It's about them becoming redundant. Let them start to justify themselves. Let's pop that bubble. Now, obviously, with all things and that, I'm not talking about something where just everybody just blanket goes into this lunacy of just refusing absolutely everything on spurious grounds. I'm talking about studied reasons that we can actually evidence. Because there is evidence provided in this situation with this argument with me with the DVLA, where they've just completely refused to do their job entirely. And no, I won't put up with that. So like I said, I'm not talking about people just refusing to do things on spurious grounds. Something that does have a level of evidence background behind it. And I want to give you an example of something that the leftist side are doing. Because, as per usual, when I say this sort of stuff, you'll have people saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other. And then they pay no attention to what the enemies of the nation are actually doing. Because the leftists do abuse the system, and they claim monies, in this particular example, on the basis of war crimes, and that money is to be returned. And I'm not joking. So it's okay when leftist, socialist morons and Islamists do it, but somehow we're supposed to just sit back and take it because these people they're anti-white racists. It's as simple as that, really, isn't it? If Johnny Foreigner is involved, oh yeah, we've got a legitimate route of recourse for that. You white people. That's how the government operates, if we let them. I think it's very much worth people putting this kind of system into a level of disarray through a mass of people demanding a comprehensive list of where any money is going, where it's being spent, and then considering what they will actually contribute, including things on the basis of this code of conduct. And what I mean by that is that we have a number of lies that we all recognise that are being told by government, and the number of lies is fairly substantial. I think we can all understand that. Well, when these lies are coming at our expense, then that money should be withheld. So if I was to consider again that this issue with the DVLA, I'm not going to put a whole bunch of information on this and that because effectively I'm looking at it quite fresh today, and I haven't come up with a level of resource that I could turn around and say absolutely specifically I have evidence of this. But what I'm coming across at the moment that I need to verify is that illegal migrants, those ones that are now being put in all the army barracks, anywhere near weapons by any chance? Army barracks do tend to store weapons, don't they? But in addition to that, these illegals are, at our expense, getting driving lessons. Apparently. And then in certain circumstances, and this one I do have to verify more specifically, some of these illegals are actually being given cars, all expenses paid. But I'm going to have my car stolen by the DVLA as you give out vehicles to Johnny Foreigner that turned up 2 weeks ago on a dinghy. I say, needs verification. But if there's any truth to this, why should I be paying for these people? Why should any of us be paying for that? Where's the manifesto that says we're going to be responsibly looking after the nation, we are going to be using the money responsibly, but we're also going to give your money to some rapist that turned up 2 weeks ago? No, I think we need to ask first, pay later, and withdraw any monies or percentage of monies that are going through to things that nobody asked for, nobody gave them permission to do. Up to and including things like that Chagos Island deal. However many multiple millions that's going to end up being. Nobody asked you to do that. And you think that I'm going to be paying Mauritius for that? No. No. Withhold our money. Simple as that. Withhold the money. So, if we are going to have people making arguments, there's a range of different things that we can do. I suppose another example, I mean, obviously I've mentioned the illegals, which is an obvious one, and the relationship with the vehicles. But in addition to the vehicle side of things, we can also refuse, in my mind, like I say, a case to be made on this, we can refuse for any payments for accommodation or taking them in at all. And we can do that because they've been lying to us about things like this safe routes. Again, if you've been with me for any period of time, the legal lies and loopholes that they think that they've been getting away with, we should be using that to argue back against them. It's like this, using the law of the sea so that the RNLI can pick them up after they, be a taxi service for them after the French have handed them halfway over. No, that is a violation of the law of the sea. I've evidenced that one before. The safe routes thing, which basically means that they can't claim asylum at an embassy in a foreign nation. Not true. See Julian Assange as the example. So they've been lying to us constantly. And when people are lying to you, you don't have to pay for it, do you? So you withhold the money. So I mean, if people want to make this case of, I do not consent, let's identify the actual grievances that we do have that we're not going to consent to. And let's make the legal arguments based on something of substance, rather than just either A, bending over and taking it and being told, oh, well, you could pay now and then you can ask a question that we won't answer later, or just literally making empty statements that everybody's going to go yay to, but then walk away going, I don't know what that means. What am I supposed to do with that? If we want to do these things, let's do it with some substance. So where possible, such as with my argument with the DVI, it doesn't always have to be a case of I'm not going to be paying X amount of money. It can also be a case of you've done something wrong, now you're going to pay me. Now, I would turn around and say that it is going to be something that's going to have to be worked on so that it doesn't become a Pyrrhic victory. This is something I've argued for a very long time, which is that it's not a case of saying you owe me money and that's now going to be taken out of the taxpayer pot. It should be you owe me money, and every single one of you in that office that has been directly responsible for it, it's coming out of your salary, up to and including the minister. Take the money directly from them is another part of the case that can be made, because otherwise they can just continue to be the scum that they quite plainly are, and they'll just say, well, it doesn't matter because if you win any cases and that, you're the one that's paying anyway. So there's various things that we need to be looking at and doing, things of substance, rather than just saying, I do not consent. Well, let's have something substantial that we can then throw some pressure back at them. these weak-minded individuals, these ideologues, these nation haters, nation destroyers. So I think there's a whole range of cases that we could make on this basis if everybody was to put their mind to it. So like I say, let's not worry too much about the commentariat spewing out yet more empty words. Let's have everybody get together and put some real substance behind this, because it's worth it. It's well beyond time that we actually do start to see some proper accountability. That's the main argument that most people have with what government does. There's no accountability. Well, there's only no accountability because we don't do anything to hold them to account. The routes to recourse that do exist only don't get employed because nobody pushes for them. You either don't understand what they are, or they're being ignored because not enough people are putting the pressure on them to actually employ it properly. So, I mean, I'm a lot calmer than I thought I would be on the basis of what's taking place at the moment, because I've had it for 5 years now. Periodically, they always do something. I mean, I was one of those people that had the bank account shut down. They don't like it when we talk about actual solutions. And I was talking to a guy today that has had relatively in-depth levels of involvement with government, shall we say. Up to the point where it's the sort of person where the intelligence services are asking them for contacts. Absolutely ridiculous. Oh, he refused, but good on him. But that particular guy now, I mean, he's got to the point where he's just sick of it, and he wants to just sort of sit in his house and just not be bothered with anything anymore. But he very much understands why I won't. Because it all boils down to this, which is that when you're trying to take a good look at what's going on with the nation and trying to look at where we can have reasonable solutions, because I don't think there's anything that I've done throughout this entire process that has been outrageous. I'm looking towards where is our money being spent, which departments are actually required. How could we actually run a system of governance as opposed to this totalitarian government that we have? How could we run things more effectively? And when these people are so scared of that, that's the indication that's all the indication that you need, that you're dealing with ideological scum. Nothing that they do stands up to scrutiny. I will always say, with any recommendation that I have towards any kind of policy that I'm suggesting, feel free to let me know if I'm wrong. Scrutinise it. Where could it be done better? Don't turn around and just say, you can't do that. I'm not interested in that kind of low IQ nonsense. I'm interested in, if not what I'm suggesting, then what? How do we actually solve these problems? And Daddy Government doesn't like this sort of stuff. You're not supposed to criticise. You're not supposed to peek behind the curtains to show these feeble-minded, waste of space little leftist morons that sit behind the curtain. I mean, I've got no great belief that somebody like Trump is particularly on our side. I mean, for Christ's sake, I mean, he's given the World Economic Forum the biggest boost they've had in years this week. I mean, they were virtually on their knees, and he's literally boosted them this week. And he's now mates with old Larry Fink. He's got his, whatever it is, the thing of peace, which includes Tony Bloody Blair and a whole bunch of Islamic terrorist funding organisations. I've got no faith in sitting back and going, oh, we need a Trump as our great white knight to come along and save us. I've always stated that the only way that this changes, and the only way that we actually get some, the only way we get our nation back, is that if we're the ones that do this. I'm so sick of people turning around and talking about the England of old. Oh, back in the day when we used to win this and we used to do that and we used to do the other. Well, you're doing nothing now. Everybody's bending over and taking it. It's long beyond time that we actually stood up and fought for our bloody nation. And when I say fight for our nation, it includes fighting against the ideological bastards within this nation. These leftist scum that have always been there, that are never satisfied until they destroy everything. Largely coming from a European bloody ideology. Which is why all of those people always come out with Brexit, because they're thick. But all of these things only happen when we sit back and take it. Well, I can't do that. I can't do that. It's just not in my bones. I can't and I won't. I will not have the police tell me that I'm supposed to commit fraud and put some other poor white bugger who I've got no idea who he is, to put him into some kind of inconvenient position just because they can't be bothered to do their job. I am not going to comply with some stupid bloody agency that prevents you from doing the things that you're actually supposed to be doing, and then thinks that they can steal your car as a result of it. I'm not doing that. I'm not playing that game. It's about time everybody actually started to really understand what we can actually do. Get those numbers together and really start to push back. Don't just make empty statements. Put some substance behind it. If people want to try to persuade me about the England that they have in their imagination, show me. Don't talk about the England of old and, oh, England can do this the best and England's that the best and all with all the other the best. At the moment, England is a nation of weaklings. Feeble weaklings that will roll over at the behest of a few limp dick bloody leftist retards. The likes of Starmer, whose ability to punch a bag if you've seen that video of him in the boxing gym, and that's what we're all bending over to. Are you serious? And that's the civil service. And that's the embodiment of the civil service and the wider public service. That's what those people are. Those weak, feeble people that are so determined to put a barrier between us because they can't answer for themselves. They can't justify themselves. They can't justify the destruction that they're doing. Do something. On that happy note, see you next week. Ta-ra.